Greetings, and welcome to the League of Women Voters Meet the Candidates Forum, a program produced in collaboration with WTJX-TV for well over 35 years. I am Francine Lang, moderator for today's program. As I live with and care for an elderly relative who may be immunocompromised due to advanced age, I have chosen to wear a mask for today's program. I ask your understanding and acceptance of my decision as I strive to protect her. It is the League's hope that through these programs, you, the voting public, will have a better understanding of each candidate running for elective office in the U.S. Virgin Islands. We invite you to look at all our programs for the 2022 election year right here on WTJX-TV with candidates seeking office as a senator in the 35th legislature or as governor or as lieutenant governor. Although all candidates for these positions were invited, not all responded or accepted the invitation. We're delighted to have here today, however, two candidates running for the position of senator in the St. Croix district. The candidates have been informed in advance of the guidelines for the program. No candidate had access to the questions in advance. The first responder to each question will be rotated among the participants. Answers are generally 60 or 90 seconds. Changes in timing of a question will be announced in advance. Any comment directed specifically at another participant will be followed by a rebuttal of 60 seconds. All are expected to be respectful of everyone. So let's begin. I will ask each candidate to identify who they are and to state their political affiliation and ballot number. We will learn more about each as our discussion ensues. Let's start with Novelle Francis. Candidate, please state your name, your ballot number, and affiliation, please.
Good day. I'm Novelle E. Francis Jr. I'm a current sitting senator, and I'm number 13 on the ballot, and I'm running as a Democrat.
Thank you. Mr. Vieira.
Good day. My name is Julian S. Vieira. I'm an independent candidate, and I'm number 21 on your ballot.
Thank you. Now for our first question. Let's begin by talking about your readiness to be a senator. Here is a two-part question for which you will each have 90 seconds to answer. As a candidate for a seat in the VI legislature, what are your competencies as well as education or training that will make you a good choice to address our issues as a senator? And what are your recent accomplishments that show your skills and readiness to assume the responsibilities of the office? So please answer both parts of the question in 90 seconds. What are your competencies and your accomplishments related to the responsibilities of the position? Again, 90 seconds. We'll start with Mr. Francis.
Thank you very much, and again, good day. My name is Novelle Francis. I'm number 13, and of course, my competency is that I've been a sitting senator for the last 4 terms, 8 years. Prior to joining the legislature, I was a police officer, and I retired as a police commissioner after serving 25 years of law enforcement. My success stories are many, as I have been able to move legislation that critically impact the quality of life of the people of our Virgin Islands. This year, we have moved over 24 sponsored and co-sponsored over 24 pieces of legislation, and I'm sure we'll have an opportunity to discuss those legislation in more detail as we go along this interview. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. Mr. Vieira?
Yes, good day. My name is Julian S. Vieira. I'm a candidate for the 35th legislature of the Virgin Islands, and I'm number 21 on your ballot. As far as my competency goes and my readiness for being a senator, I've been a businessman in the Virgin Islands for over 40 years. I understand business. I understand the need for our Virgin Island to move forward. I understand where the minds of our people are here in the territory. I also understand that we are in a failed state in the Virgin Islands, and I'm ready to put forward legislation that will move us from this failed state into a progressive state here in the U.S. Virgin Islands. I thank you.
Thank you. Now let's talk about your vision for the VI. 2027 will mark the 100th anniversary of American citizenship for Virgin Islanders and 110 years since purchase from Denmark. The question is, what is your vision with respect to self-governance for the U.S. Virgin Islands, and what role do you intend to play, if any? Please note that self-governance does not necessarily imply independence. And you'll have 60 seconds for this question. We'll start with Mr. Vera.
Self-governance here in the Virgin Islands. In accordance with my platform, which is a 4-point platform, I plan to introduce a Virgin Islands territorial bank. I plan to introduce food security in the Virgin Islands. We also plan to reapportion the Senate so that we can have better representation within the Virgin Islands. And most importantly, we plan to reform the education system so we can educate our children about themselves and the connectivity towards one another here in the Virgin Islands so we can move forward to create better citizens here in the Virgin Islands. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Francis?
As a leader in this territory, I know it's critical that we not just have self-determination, but in fact that we continue to educate our people what self-determination will provide for them. I think it's critical that we move towards a 6th constitution, get the input of our community, and I understand as a leader that it's just not my decision to be made, it's also my responsibility to hear from the people that's been most impacted by self-determination or governance of the Constitution, and to be able to get their feedback into this. I'm prepared to move whatever agenda is determined by my people collectively and consensusly so that we could go and ensure that in fact, after these many years, that we can make a decision, how do we move forward in this territory?
Thank you. The next question, to what extent should moral and ethical issues in the private life of political candidates be taken into account by voters in making their choices, and why? You'll have 60 seconds for this question, and we'll start with Mr. Francis.
Thank you very much for the question. I think morals and ethics is the very most important critical determination to be made by voters when considering the individuals that they want to represent them. I have always maintained a leadership stance and again make sure that I live the life that I want and representative of the people. I continue to do that, making sure that in fact that I live a clean life and that I carry myself as a statesman and continue to make sure that I lead from the front. I think it's so critical, and I think that ethics and moral, and when you look at me, Novel Francis Jr. number 13, you will always see that I make sure that I'm mindful of what a representative of the people means.
Thank you. Mr. Vera?
Can you repeat the question?
Sure, no problem. To what extent should moral and ethical issues in the private life of political candidates be taken into account by voters in making their choices, and why? And you have 60 seconds.
The morals and competency of the candidates should be top priority for the voters in the Virgin Islands. It is very important that we elect leaders that we can look up to, that our children can look up to, so in turn that they can aspire to be like the leaders that we elect here in the Virgin Islands. Thank you.
Thank you. In a recent poll of the electorate in 2022, voters identified 4 areas of major concern as being education, crime, health, and WAPA. Let's look at each one separately and address what your responses would be for these matters if elected to the 35th legislature. With respect to education, cited by voters as one of 4 major concerns, what do you see as the primary challenges facing education today, and what would be your strategies for addressing them as a senator in the 35th legislature? You have 90 seconds, and we will start with Mr. Vera.
Can you list the 4 areas again, please?
It was education, crime, health, and WAPA. And then this question is specifically with respect to education.
Education is paramount because everything that we do within our lives stems from how we're educated. As far as education is concerned, education should be based on an individual's frame of mind. Our education system has failed us deeply because we do not educate our children with the truth about history. So within our education forum, we plan to educate our children about themselves, their connectivity to where they live, and the connectivity to each other. In turn, this will create better citizens within the Virgin Islands. I thank you.
Mr. Francis, did you need me to read a question?
No, thank you very much for the question. Education is fundamentally very critical to our students, and we have a responsibility in this society to make sure that our students are properly educated. We have to certainly get to the root causes of what is creating the barriers by which our youth are educated. You know, we got to break the school to prison pipeline, for example. We have to go back and look at poverty, look at the issues that's confronting our students as to why they're having this difficulty in being educated. Also look at behavioral health, mental health, their inability a lot of times to move forward. I believe that it's essential that we're able to have early intervention, diagnosis, and be able to provide the necessary treatment to move our students forward. But more importantly, our responsibility will have to continue to educate our students and hold our parents accountable as well. You know, we have analysis recently where our students had been truant for school for over 90 days in some instances. There is no way that they could be educated if they're absent from our school system. We want to continue to make sure that our teachers are provided with the necessary resources to educate our students, make sure that they're adequately compensated and paid so that at the end of the day, they could ensure that our students are properly educated by having the necessary resources to do their job. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. With respect to health, cited by voters as one of the top 4 major concerns, many leave the territory in search of health care, especially on St. Croix. What do you see as the primary challenges regarding health care, and what would be your strategies for addressing them as a senator in the 35th legislature? You have 90 seconds, and we will start with Mr. Francis.
Health is wealth. Thank you very much for the question. Nobel Francis, number 13, and General Day ballot. And of course, we're limited here in terms of, since the hurricane, we don't have a suitable hospital to make sure that our people receive proper health care. In addition to that, we have a significant of uncompensated care that continue to stress our hospital facilities. It's critical that we're able to provide a specialty for the care that's required here. We bleed almost close to $30 to $40 million to stateside healthcare every single day. We have to get our hospital up and running, and I know that I've been working hard and getting our JFL North, for example, to get that open, so that we could have adequate healthcare here. But we also have to minimize by ensuring that there's proper prevention, because of course, if we prevent individuals from requiring health care, then certainly it'll minimize the impact that's happening on our healthcare facility. But at the end of the day, we need a suitable healthcare facility, and we could become the healing destination here in the Virgin Islands if we're able to really get our healthcare up and running. We have all of the resources and the elements, sun, beaches, and everything to be able to provide healthcare to our system. But we can't continue to bleed, towards the U.S. mainland. The expenses in the amount of almost $30 to $60 million of healthcare services. Thank you very much for the question.
With respect to crime, cited by voters as one of the top 4 major concerns. There are 2 parts to this question. Oh, Mr. Vieira, I'm sorry. We didn't give you a chance to respond to the health question. Let me read it again. My apologies. With respect to health, cited by voters as one of the top 4 major concerns, many leave the territory in search of health care, especially on St. Croix. What do you see as the primary challenges regarding health care, and what would be your strategies for addressing them as a senator in the 35th legislature? You have 90 seconds.
Thanks for the question. There's no question that healthcare is a major problem here in the Virgin Islands, especially on St. Croix. Our healthcare situation has been neglected for decades. What needs to be implemented is more proactive understanding when it comes to healthcare as far as dieting is concerned, which needs to be impacted. What needs to be done also in the healthcare division is that our healthcare professional needs to be properly compensated. A total rehashment of the healthcare system needs to be done so that we can move our patients from when they're admitted into the hospital, and a more holistic understanding as to treating our patients needs to be adapted. I thank you for the question. My name is Julian S. Vieira, number 21 on your ballot.
Thank you. With respect to crime, cited by voters as one of the top 4 major concerns, it's a 2-part question. What do you see as the challenges, and what would be your strategies for addressing them as a senator in the 35th legislature? You'll answer this section first, and then we'll go to the second part of the question. 90 seconds. We will start with Mr. Vieira.
Crime is a major problem here in the Virgin Islands. It has gotten out of hand over the decades because of failed policies. The individuals that we keep electing are reactionaries when it comes to crime. What needs to be done is that our education system needs to be changed to educate our children as to their connectivity to where they're from and their connectivity to each other, so that we can better embrace one another here in the Virgin Islands. I thank you for the question. Julian S. Vieira, number 21 on your ballot.
Thank you. Mr. Francis?
Challenges of crime, as you know, I've served as a law enforcement officer for 25 years, and it has worsened over the years, again, because we have issue of poverty in our community. But we also have situations where drugs and guns are available and easily accessible to our youngsters, and they have now endured the opportunity to embrace these guns and drugs and carry out their act of violence in our community. It's critical that we have to educate our students that there is no way out of a life of crime. We have to provide education as an alternative to this life of crime. But at the end of the day, again, we have to continue to ensure that our law enforcement is providing crime prevention strategies, minimize our guns from coming into the territory, make sure that we're holding individuals accountable for violating these laws. But we have to educate our students so that they could understand that there is a life unto them that is much better than a life of crime. We also have to make sure that our police department are given the resources, our education department are given the resources, again, to make sure that we're minimizing the life of crime for our students and our community.
Thank you. The second part of the question is sexual assault against our children is a concern in our community. Recent disclosure of assaults against 12 schoolboys by a teacher is shocking, and the community was rightfully outraged. But girls are raped and assaulted too. How can you, as a senator, protect our boys and girls from sexual assaults by adults? You have 60 seconds for this question, and we'll start again with Mr. Vieira.
There's no question that sexual assault is a major issue here in the Virgin Islands. It all goes back to education. We have been producing a set of lawless individuals here in the Virgin Islands based on the fact that we do not understand our connectivity to each other. What needs to be implemented are programs to teach our young people as to how to avoid the situations when it comes to sexual assault. What needs to be implemented also are stricter rules and punishments for individuals who assault our children sexually. I thank you for the question. Julian S. Vera, number 21 on your ballot.
Thank you. Mr. Francis?
There's absolutely no tolerance for sexual assaults or abuse of our children. I will not stand by idly and will do everything in my power to make sure that we are creating policies to continue to hold those individuals as accountable for abuses. But let's be mindful as well is that a lot of sexual abuse that we're seeing in our community is not done by strangers. It's by family members. It's by guardians. It's by caretakers. These individuals that develop the trust of these youngsters and then perpetrate this heinous crime on our youngsters. It should not be tolerated. And again, those individuals, we have very strong abuse regulations and policies and laws against them. We have to make sure that those individuals are prosecuted and they receive the penalty substantial in terms of the sexual assault upon our youngsters. It's unacceptable and it should not be allowed to continue. I'm Novell E. Francis Jr., number 13 on the ballot.
Thank you. With respect to WAPA as one of the top 4 concerns cited by voters, what do you see as the major challenges for WAPA, and what would be your strategies for addressing them as a senator in the 35th legislature? You'll have 90 seconds to answer this question. We'll start with Mr. Francis.
Thank you very much for the question. I'm Novell Francis, number 13. WAPA continues to be a level of frustration for our community as business individuals as well as residents. It's unacceptable at the levels that it costs us in terms of paying for WAPA bills. We have pumped millions and millions of dollars of resources into the Virgin Islands Water and Power Authority and still have not seen any relief in sight. I think it's critical that we're moved towards some discussion of privatization of WAPA. It's unacceptable. This legislature continues to subsidize WAPA as a means of not passing that cost on to our community. We have to continue to provide alternative energy, solar panels, wind turbines. We have to create alternatives so that we don't have to rely solely on WAPA. But the operating costs of WAPA continue to mount on us. We also have to be mindful that those individuals that have been able to leave the grid and be able to stand up their own, solar powered, continue to leave the operating cost to those of us that continue to pay WAPA. We have to have a balanced approach to this issue, but at the end of the day, we have to provide alternative energy to our citizens, throughout so that they don't have to rely solely on WAPA to continue to exist.
Thank you. Mr. Vera, same question. Did you need me to read it over?
Yes, please.
Okay. What do you see as the major challenges for WAPA, and what would be your strategies for addressing them as a senator in the 35th legislature? And you have 90 seconds.
Major challenges for WAPA, I would say, is mismanagement. For decades upon decades upon decades, we have been faced with the same situation with WAPA. It is very strange to me that our legislature hasn't gotten together and resolved the issues with WAPA. It is strange that we should be paying for the way we produce current. We should not be paying for the way we produce current, namely fossil fuel. What we should be paying for is our power plant and the utility and the workers that actually work for us to produce this power. We need to investigate solar or wind energy so that we can produce power without actually paying for the way we produce power daily. The solution to WAPA's problem is to change the way we produce power. We should not be paying daily for the fuel that we use to produce power. We should be relying on whether solar or wind energy or ocean current energy to produce power. My name is Julian S. Vera, number 21 on your ballot. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. For the first time in 25 years, GERS was not identified as a major concern. What is your understanding of why this is so, and what lessons can we learn about how this came to be so? You'll have 60 seconds, and we're going to start with Mr. Vieira.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Sure. What is your understanding of why GRS was not identified by voters or by residents as a major concern? And what are the lessons that we can learn about how this came to be that way? 60 seconds.
The reason why GERS was not identified as a major concern by the residents of the Virgin Islands is simply because I don't think they was aware of the seriousness of the problem that GERS was in. And the answer to solving the problem that GERS has is that the government needs to be able to pay their bills in a timely manner. People's monies were being taken out from their paychecks bi-weekly, and yet the government wouldn't match the monies that was taken out by individuals, which compounded the bills that the monies that the government was owing to GERS. If bills are being paid in a timely manner, it would not have compounded the monies that the government was owing to GERS. So bills need to be paid in a timely manner. I thank you for the question. Julian S. Vieira, number 21, on your ballot.
Thank you, Mr. Francis.
I am so happy to report and have been one of the senators that sponsored legislation to address the solvency of the government employees retirement system. The issue of government retirement system really hinged on their ability to the fact that they were paying out more money than they were bringing in. As a result of that, they were facing insolvency. Working along with the administration, the 34th legislature as well as the 33rd legislature moved a legislation to provide solvency for the government employees retirement system permanently. In addition to that, I moved legislation to allow for bonuses to be paid to those employees that were 60 years and older, which had not been paid for the last 3 years, and now will be paid before the end of this month. I'm so happy that GRS is now, we check the box, and we're no longer concerned about government retirement system. However, we can't rest on our laurels. We have a responsibility to maintain solvency as we move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let's talk about growing the economy. While tourism is the backbone of our economy, the majority of the electorate do not work in that industry. Many work in government, but that does little to bring in new dollars. So what's left is the private sector. What have you done or plan to do as a senator to grow or support the private sector and to encourage more locals to become successful in the private sector? You have 60 seconds, and we'll start with Mr. Francis.
Thank you very much for the question. I'm Novel E. Francis, Jr., number 13. I'm very much appreciative of the question that you have asked because I am one of those senators that have provided for economic prosperity and development here in this territory. I created the South Shore Enterprise Zone, and along with the South Shore Enterprise Zone, I provided $1 million to the EDA for the marketing of the South Shore Enterprise Zone, which will continue to seek to provide economic development as well as jobs. Additionally, I provided for the Tech Village, as well as the Catalyst Fund, $5 million again for small businesses to be established within the Tech Village and as a Catalyst Fund. Any small business now have an opportunity to be able to expand their business through this loan program that should be paid back. Economic development is certainly critical to the well-being, it's the backbone of the economy, and I'm happy to have moved legislation to benefit us all. Thank you very much. Novel Francis, Jr., number 13.
Thank you. Mr. Vera, we'll have you next for 30 seconds. You need me to read the question?
Please do.
While tourism is the backbone of our economy, the majority of the electorate do not work in that industry. Many work in government, but that does little to bring in new dollars. So what's left is the private sector. What have you done or plan to do as a senator to grow or support the private sector and to encourage more locals to become successful in the private sector? Again, 60 seconds.
First of all, we are assuming that the Virgin Islands have a monetary problem, which I would disagree with. In our 4-point plan, we plan to introduce a Virgin Islands owned bank that would ensure that the bleeding of the monies that exist in the Virgin Islands into foreign banks will not happen. Also, we plan to introduce legislation that would give small business more incentives. Instead of giving incentives to bigger corporations, we plan to introduce legislation to give small business more incentives so that they can open and be more productive in the Virgin Islands. Julian S. Vera, number 21, on your ballot.
Thank you. The pandemic has shown us that we need to diversify our economy and supplement our dependence on tourism. What other opportunities do you see besides tourism and alcohol for growing and diversifying our economy? And what are the challenges to making them a reality? You have 60 seconds. We'll start with Mr. Vera.
Julian S. Vera, number 21 on your ballot. There are thousands of acres of land here in the Virgin Islands, namely on St. Croix, that is unused by the Virgin Islands government. We plan to implement a self-sufficiency plan which will harness the millions of gallons of water that is dumped back into the Atlantic Ocean daily, use this water for farming, and introduce homesteads so our people here in the Virgin Islands can grow their own food so that we can be more self-sufficient as far as food security is concerned. My name is Julian S. Vera, number 21 on your ballot. I thank you for the question.
Thank you. Mr. Francis?
Thank you very much for the question. Diversification of our economy is critical to our well-being. I think for far too long we have relied on refineries, we have relied on tourism to determine our economic structure. It's critical that we move away from that. I have moved legislation that I previously indicated in respect to the social enterprise zone, the RT Park, as well as the Catalyst Fund. But in addition to that, I moved legislation to allow for a percentage of our government budget to go towards agriculture, again, to allow for food sustainability and food security and farm preparation. We have to work collectively to be able to diversify our economy. We can't continue to put all our eggs in one basket because we see what happens, when there is some catastrophe that minimizes those opportunities. Diversification is all of our responsibility, and I've started.
Thank you. Medical marijuana was intended as a possible boost to the economy, and an office has been created to develop policies and procedures for oversight of medical marijuana in the territory. It appears that little has come from it thus far. What do you see as the role of the legislature in addressing this matter? You have 60 seconds, and we will start with Mr. Novell Francis.
Medical marijuana has been deemed to be a small fragment of our economy. If we're to move with medical marijuana, again, all it could net us is perhaps about $19 to $20 million. I believe that there's a discussion that's being had nationally as well as throughout our Caribbean island in respect to legalization. I believe that we need to work to ensure that there's proper structure in place, as well as for us to be able to have the rehabilitation mechanism in place to allow for legalization. But we have to have this discussion with a wider community and make sure that we're moving in that stead. We can't continue to talk about medical marijuana. I think the day has come and the train has already left the track that legalization will be our best approach in respect to addressing the marijuana situation in the territory.
Thank you. And Mr. Vera?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Sure. Medical marijuana was intended as a possible boost to the economy, and an office has been created to develop policies and procedures for oversight of medical marijuana in the territory. It appears that little has come from it thus far. What do you see as the role of the legislature in addressing this matter? And you have 60 seconds.
It is evident that medical marijuana is a hoax here in the Virgin Islands. It is evident because of where from the implementation of this legislation we have gotten so far, I would be in full support of legalization of marijuana with proper education of the pros and cons of using marijuana within our community. I would be in total support of legalization of marijuana with proper education within our community. Julian S. Vera, number 21 on your ballot.
Thank you. Let's turn our attention to the environment and climate change. For over 30 years, the League of Women Voters has asked the same question regarding the development of a land and water use plan for the territory. And without fail, over the past 30 years, gubernatorial and senatorial candidates alike have pledged that on their watch a plan would be developed. None has. None. So we ask this question instead. What impact, if any, have you seen on the territory as a result of not having a plan, and what would you do, and what do you see as a concern moving forward without a plan? You have 60 seconds. We'll start with Mr. Vera.
It is evident that the individuals that have been elected time and time again has failed this Virgin Islands as far as our land and water use plan. It will be more and more devastating if things are not put in place to curtail the situations that's going on now in the Virgin Islands. Within our 4-point plan, we plan to recycle wastewater that is being dumped into the Atlantic Ocean daily. We plan to designate specific areas in the Virgin Islands for homesteading as far as land is concerned. This is part of our 4-point plan for land and water use here in the Virgin Islands. Julian S. Vera, number 21 on your ballot.
Thank you. Mr. Francis?
Thank you very much for the question. Global change and climate change and global warming is in fact real, and it's impacting our territory. I'll tell you that land and water use plan has been a discussion, as you have indicated, for the last 30 years. However, I think that it's nearing completion. There's an RFP has been issued for us to be able to get a land and water use plan in place. But as a result of that, and it has been detrimental to our environment because, of course, the legislature now is being tasked with spot zoning. When we spot zone, then we have a hodgepodge of environmentally unsafe establishment projects throughout the island. We have to balance the discussion between economic development and preservations. But it's critical for us to be able to have that land and water use plan in place, and also to be able to get our community's input in terms of what we need to see here happen. But I think too, we need to have that discussion about a city planner, somebody that will be ultimately responsible to recognizing our needs for planning our city's outlay.
Thank you. What do you perceive as potential adverse impacts of climate change on the territory? What would you do as senator to ensure that attention is brought to mitigating those impacts? You have 60 seconds, and we'll start with Mr. Francis.
Thank you very much. Again, I just indicated that global warming and climate change is in fact real, and it's happening. If you look at the sargassum that's happening in the territory, if you look at the type of rains and hurricanes that we're experiencing, I mean, it's getting more and more catastrophic. If you look at the icebergs that's melting, nationally and impacting us here in this territory. If you look at the birds, moving around here and looking for safe grounds is very critical. I believe that we need to capitalize on all of the federal funding that have been made available by the Biden administration to make sure that we're doing the studies, but more importantly, to make sure that we're putting in place those preventative and precautionary measures that's necessary to protect us all in terms of what the global warming and climate change present to us.
Thank you, Mr. Vera. What do you perceive as potential adverse impacts of climate change on the territory, and what would you do as a senator to ensure that attention is brought to mitigating these impacts? And you have 60 seconds.
Adverse changes to our Virgin Islands. It is obvious that our shorelines are being eroded. It's obvious that we are being impacted yearly by this saga. It is obvious that we're facing hurricanes every year. What needs to be put in place is more implementation of federal funds so that we can educate our locals as to precautionary measures to be taken as far as climate change is concerned. Federal funds is badly needed to educate individuals and to help fund whatever catastrophe that we would endure as the time goes on. So federal funding is vital here in the Virgin Islands to help us deal with climate change. Julian S. Vera, number 21, and your ballot.
Thank you. Let's talk a bit about housing. Many young families are leaving the territory because they cannot afford the housing market here or even find affordable rents. Some have suggested reinstituting rent control as a way of stabilizing the rental market. What is your position on rent control for the Virgin Islands? You have 60 seconds. We'll start with Mr. Vera.
The problem goes deeper than just rent control. It is obvious that our islands are being infiltrated with individuals that has deeper pockets than the individuals that actually live here in the Virgin Islands. Take St. John's, for instance. It is obvious what is going on in St. John's. Our people are being pushed out of their homes because they cannot pay whatever legal fees or whatever taxes are being imposed on them because of individuals that are moving in. More education needs to be had to our individuals as to how we can preserve what we have, how we can preserve lands and properties that have been left to us by our ancestors. More education needs to be had in that area. Julian S. Vera, number 21, and your ballot.
Thank you. Mr. Francis?
I support rent control in a capitalistic state. You know, I know that rent control can become an issue. I move legislation to actually allow for rent control. But I think most importantly is that we have to continue to provide housing development for our citizens. And, you know, again, home ownership I think is critical. This body, the 34th legislature, and I was a bill sponsor, provided $4 million for first-time home buyers. Again, so that they could be able to go to the bank and be able to get the down payment, a 20% down payment that's affordable to them to be able to pay for, to assist them in being able to have home ownership. We have to remove the barriers and allow for individuals not just to worry about rent, but to really drive home ownership in the territory. I am about home ownership.
Thank you. Candidates have discovered that it is wise to talk about promoting agriculture in order to get elected. But once in office, very little is heard about strengthening agribusiness. What do you see as the challenges to making agribusiness a reality in the VI, and how would you address them as a senator? You have 60 seconds, and we'll start with Mr. Francis.
Thank you very much for the question. Noble E. Francis Jr., number 13. I believe that agribusiness is critical and important, and I believe that the 34th legislature as well as the administration has really been working towards allowing for agribusiness. We just funded for the University of the Virgin Islands to start the agriculture program. Like I indicated earlier, I have allowed for a percentage of our budget to go towards agriculture, which will increase the budget on an annual basis by at least $1.5 million to $2 million to agriculture. I believe that the tech village and the tech park would allow for opportunities for us to be able to do that as well. But more importantly is that we have to be able to support our farmers to be able to understand and be able to get younger individuals involved in farming because nobody wants to go out there and do that toiling no more. We have to really utilize technology to assist us in our farming industry. Noble Francis Jr., number 13.
Thank you. Mr. Vera?
Good day, Julian S. Vera, number 21 on your ballot. It is obvious that the agriculture industry here in the Virgin Islands has been just talk over the years. With my 4-point plan, agriculture is a major segment. We plan to introduce homesteads that individuals can actually live on to produce more food here for us in the Virgin Islands. With the 3 million gallons of water that is dumped back into the Caribbean Sea daily, we plan to refilter that water and create an artificial lake so that we can use that water to irrigate our farms here in the Virgin Islands. Along with producing crops, we plan to introduce a processing and a packaging plant so that we can add value to the products that we produce here in the Virgin Islands. As I said before, agriculture has just been conversation here in the Virgin Islands. I do have a sustainable agriculture plan for St. Croix and the rest of the Virgin Islands. Julian S. Vera, number 21 on your ballot.
Thank you. Rebuttal? Go ahead.
I want to say that when you hear about the 4-point plan, it's critical that we have already put in place some of the things that my colleague here is presenting. When you talk about packaging center, when you talk about water sustainability and water availability, those are things that's currently in place. I think that we have to move from the conversation piece now to the implementation and the practicality. There's no new legislation to support agriculture. I believe that now what we want to see is the implementation to be able to get our farmers and all of those interested and be able to capitalize on what's available to them. Thank you very much. Novel Francis, number 13.
Thank you. Many candidates for the legislature have a written platform, but in reading them, it is hard to differentiate one candidate from the next, or even one political party from the next. So how does one differentiate an ICM versus Democrat from independent based on what is stated in the platforms? You have 60 seconds, and we'll start with Mr. Vera.
I cannot speak as to how one can differentiate a Democrat from an ICMer. As far as I'm concerned, the Democratic Party has not put forward a specific plan to move the Virgin Islands forward. The organization that I'm a part of, we have a specific plan and we can differentiate ourselves from who the Democratic Party is based on the 4-point plan that we have. This plan includes education reform, agriculture, a Virgin Islands owned bank, and reapportioning the Senate. I'm number 21, Julian S. Vera, a candidate for the 35th legislature, on your ballot. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Francis, and you have 60 seconds.
Thank you very much for the question. The Democratic Party is the only real party here in the territory. When you look at the Republican Party, they're non-existence. When you look at the ICM Party, they're non-existence. The Democratic Party is the one that continued to be the target of this community because we're the only effective party that we have here. We're for the people, by the people. So every time you hear the conversation about what the Democratic Party have done, is because we have a structure, because we have a platform, because we have the hearts of our community in mind. So that's the reason why you can't. You could tell the difference. You could tell the difference between the Republican, ICM, and the Democrats because the Democrats are doers. The Democrats have been the majority that have been elected here in the territory for a number of years. That's why we become the target. Novel Francis, number 13 on your ballot.
Thank you. Crimes by young adult males has led to an alarming increase in the number of deaths among that population. A sociological study revealed that such crimes are often committed by males who drop out of school. What would be your response as a senator to this finding? You have 60 seconds, and we will start with Mr. Francis.
Thank you very much for the question. Of course, sociology and physiology have always been a determining factor in the crime behavior that we're seeing here, and that's why it's so critical for us to be able to break the school to prison pipeline. A lot of times we see our youngsters, as soon as they get into any type of disciplinary action, any delinquency, that the first thing we do is send them to YRC. We send them to the juvenile court. I believe that there's restorative justice that could be happening within the school environment, in school suspension and those action. Again, when we look at the dropout rate, is because individuals are having difficulties in school. For whatever, there may be some developmental disabilities that's forcing them out of school. We have to be able to work, analyze, intervene, and be able to support our students, so that they could get the best education possible and not live a life of crime. Any young man with a bright future will rarely take a dark path. Novel Francis, number 13.
Thank you, Mr. Vera.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Sure. Crimes by young adult males has led to an alarming increase in the number of deaths among that population. A sociological study revealed that such crimes are often committed by males who drop out of school. What would be your response as a senator to this finding? And you have 60 seconds.
First off, in our education plan, there's a reform school that will be implemented. A reform school not only to move our children from regular school, but to move them in an environment where they can be analyzed as to the home problems that they have, and they can gain help as far as dealing with the problems that they have. We need to be more proactive as far as our youngsters are concerned. Education in the proper manner, education with the understanding of how we are connected here to each other in the Virgin Islands, and how we are connected to the place that we have been birthed here in the Virgin Islands. Education is the key and is the answer to the crime and violence that we are facing with our youngsters. Julian S. Vera, number 21, on your ballot.
Thank you. We have time for each candidate to expand on any one topic of choice for 60 seconds before we move to the closing statements. Let's start with Julian Vera.
Good day again, Julian S. Vera, number 21, on your ballot. Education. Education is the understanding that drives everything that we do. Education from the proper perspective. Education that lets our youngsters understand, as I said, the connectivity to where they have been birthed and the place that have grown them, and the connectivity to each other. I can say we reduce in time most of the problems that we are facing here in the Virgin Islands. Education from the proper perspective would be the driving force in reducing the problems in the future that we're having here in the Virgin Islands. Julian S. Vera, number 21, on your ballot. I thank you.
And Mr. Francis, again, one topic of your choice, and you have 60 seconds.
Thank you very much, and I believe that this education as well as health, also I kind of create a quick hybrid. But when we talk about the education of our youngsters, it's critical that we're able to do early diagnosis and early intervention. We need to be able to get in and make sure we're addressing the developmental disabilities that we're experiencing our youngsters and get them evaluated. We need a team approach. We need to make sure that Human Services, Department of Health, the Virgin Islands Police Department, and all of these entities are at the table, so that we could be able to provide the necessary care and support to our youngsters. We have a lot of behavioral health issues that's confronting our youngsters as well. They're exposed to a lot that's going on within their community: drugs, guns, crime. And we need to really provide that level of support to them. We also want to make sure that we're addressing the youngsters, because what they're doing is imitating what they're seeing by their older siblings. So we want to be able to support the holistic approach to our youngsters and be able to provide some support to them. We have a small community, and I believe we have it within us to really get in and address the issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now the candidates will have 60 seconds each for a closing statement, starting with Novell Francis.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you very much, Ms. Lang, for the interviews. I want to thank WTJX again for hosting this forum. It's so critical. You have a choice to make as you continue to look at your senatorial candidates for the 35th legislature. And when you look at Novell E. Francis Jr., number 13, you know that you could look at someone that works across the aisle. I work with my Democrats as well as my non-Democrats, because I think it's important for us to come together as a community. But that you look at someone that have spent the last 4 terms in the Senate continue to make sure that St. Croix and the Virgin Islands get their fair share at the table. I'm Novell E. Francis Jr. I'm focused forward to a brighter and better and prosperous Virgin Islands. Please join me, Novell Francis Jr., number 13. I also want to thank Mr. Vera and wish him good luck in his endeavors to join the 35th legislature and to join me in the 35th legislature. I look forward to working with you if the committee so desires.
Thank you. Mr. Vera, your closing statement, again, 60 seconds.
Good day again. My name is Julian S. Vera, a candidate for the 35th legislature, number 21 on your ballot. I do give thanks for this invitation and the interview. It is very obvious to me that we have been electing individuals within the legislature for decades who seems to have no understanding as to where we are and what it would take to lead us from where we are into a better state. I would consider the Virgin Islands, particularly St. Croix, a failed community. A failed community in the fact that if we drive down the Melvin Evans Highway in the night, we don't know where we're going. If we go to the hospital, we can see the treatment that we get when we go into the hospital. I think we need to start electing proactive individuals and not reactive individuals. Individuals with the vision that will move us from this failed state into a more productive state as the years go on. Julian S. Vera, number 21 on your ballot. Thank you again.
Thank you, candidates. And thank you, WTJX-TV and staff, for today's program. Thank you for watching and for understanding my choice for a mask today. The League of Women Voters hopes this program has helped with your understanding of the candidates, and in so doing will inform your vote in November. The League reminds you that your vote determines the future of the Virgin Islands. Every vote does count. During elections, we often see an individual who barely makes the cut because a few more people did vote, or one who barely loses and wishes if only a few more persons had voted. So let your voice be heard by your vote. It's your right. Take it. I am Francine Lang for the League of Women Voters of the Virgin Islands, saying vote early or vote in November, but vote.